Well, hello, Dan. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Really looking forward to this one today. And typically, I would ask that you would introduce yourself and explain to the audience who you are, how you got here, and what you're doing.
Okay, well, I'm the Vortex detective. And for me, a vortex is a place that makes us feel something. A lot of different researchers researching Earth energies and Earth mysteries by whatever name, and each of them coming from their own perspective. I hope to be presenting the science behind Earth magic. I've had some magical and miraculous things happen, and I'm approaching the science as rigorously as I can and starting my study of these paranormal places really with geophysics.
All right. You want to expand on geophysics for the audience?
Sure. Well, the our our physical body is very much electrical and magnetic, and we're subject to this churning ocean of electromagnetism. We're swimming in this churning ocean of electromagnetism, which perhaps we, for the most part, don't give much thought. But there's no separation between our physical body and this electromagnetic environment in which we exist. So when you see with electromagnetic eyes, when you use technology such as magnetic maps and that manner of thing, you can actually see this magnetic, electromagnetic field in which we're moving through and existing in. And of course, it's changing with its own time cycles. So I propose my hypothesis is that this affects us not only physically, but also our psyche, our neurology, of course, our brain cells, and also that because there is no separation, that not only does this the electromagnetic field of the earth affect us, our electromagnetic field, our aura, but there's this relationship where of unity where we're also affecting the electromagnetic field of the place. So it's a geomancy, really. It's an earth magic, which is a subset of alchemy. I call it the science behind earth magic. And so I approach it from this standpoint of extraordinary healing, really. But at the, I think the far end of the spectrum, there's this sense of a vortex that's a portal in time or a portal to another dimension, and we can surely go there too and talk about consciousness and magic as well.
Okay, so it's a lot like ley lines and understanding where the magnetic energy from the earth is coming out and penetrating the surface. Kinda.
Well, very much so. Yes, ley lines are one kind of energy phenomena, let's say, and you could, and to oversimplify, you could think of what I'm calling vortexes as where the ley lines are crossing. But ley lines is actually a real narrow term. There's many different kinds of earth energies. And so I've spent about 30 years studying these many different researchers on earth energies. And from my standpoint, one of the highest uses of this study is to enliven our own cells and all living cells, whether that's plants or animals or ourselves.
Okay, so now I'm getting it. It's basically like air. Air is the energy field around us that you're referring to, which is also charged or component of vortexes and ley lines, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh
Am I?
my gosh. Well, the electromagnetic field in which we exist has dozens of components, and so there's we exist, of course, in the electromagnetic field of the Earth, and there's electrical currents in the Earth, and there's electrical currents in flowing water, seawater, and even fresh water. There's dissolved minerals, and it has its own electromagnetic magnetic properties. And then in the air, there's electrical ions in the air. So all of these different components, and I also mentioned time cycles, so solar and lunar cycles coming together, and others coming together to create this experience we're having. So some places stand out as kind of an electric anomaly or magnetic anomaly, and that may be due to changes in elevation or in mineral deposits, subsurface reason, maybe faults. And so that these are going to have an effect on us as we move around them and into them, through them. And we know these places. We know how we feel when we get to a certain mountaintop or a certain body of water. We have this knowing, and um, my purpose is really to deepen our connection to the earth for the purpose of perfecting ourselves and practicing our psychic abilities and for harmonizing the planet.
Okay. Interesting. Yes, this is going to be a great conversation. So I had my aura read about, oh man, must be 6 or 7 years ago. I still have the paperwork. It was really interesting the way they set it up, and then they basically took a picture of you, and so it was the first time that I actually got to see my own energy field, which is what you were referring to earlier as interacting with these other energy fields. Um, and yes, I've had numerous experiences in my life where the most recent was at Santa Susana Field Laboratory, also known as Rocketdyne. It's where they took the Nazi scientists after Operation Paperclip, and they set up rocket building, all kinds of crazy experiments. They actually set up a nuclear reactor up on this site, which melted down in 1958 that nobody knew about. The information finally came out. But when I was up there, because of the work that I do, I was kind of very blessed to be able to get a pass from NASA, and hike around the site, accompanied, of course. Um, and so, in doing this, I looked to the gentleman John, who was basically my tour guide, and then there was another person, a woman with us, who was represents the site itself. So she's kind of like the security overwatch, where John is the one that's actually touring me around. And I'd say maybe 15 minutes into the walk, I said to him, "Something's really going on here." I go, "Eh, like the hair on my arms starting to stand up. Is there some kind of vortex, or is there a religious site here anywhere?" And he looked me dead in the eyes. He goes, "Oh, just you wait." And I'm like, "Okay, all right. What does that mean?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'll explain more as we walk." So we continued to walk down this path, and we came into this canyon. And he points up to the top of the cliff on the right side and says, "You see that rock sticking out?" I go, "Yeah, yeah, it looks like a diving board." He goes, "Well, actually, it's more like a gnomon on a sundial." I go, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, at the winter solstice, the sun hits that gnomon and points to a cave." And I go, "Really?" And he whips out his phone. He starts showing me pictures of the cave. He's been one of the few people, other than the spiritual leader, the religious leaders of the sacred tribes that took care of this place, to actually be able to get close enough to the cave to actually take pictures of it. And it was impressive. And at that point, like every single hair on my body was standing on end. I was tingling. It was crazy. And so we got to go to where they have this gate fence with barbed wire on it, stuff around the cave, so nobody can get to it. But just the feelings that I got as I got closer to the fence, I started looking around, and there's all these cup holes. So a cup hole is where they would grind their corn or mark a spot, for like harvest time or for planting time or when the rains are expected. So as that sundial or gnomon hit those different cups, they would know what time or what their responsibilities with nature were to be at that point in time. And so, that's just one example of my magnetic paralysis, maybe is a way to say it. I've always been an empath, so I've always been able to feel people and stuff. But I later honed in my skills on really paying attention to some of these things. And I'm sure, I'm sure you've been to Sedona, right?
I have.
Yeah. So, there's a number of them down there. And when I went on a tour there, I really didn't understand the level and power of those vortexes. But as you enter into them or get near them, similar experiences were happening. Like hair was rising up. I'd be like, what is wrong with me? Why am I feeling like this? And again, we went back to a shop later to, get some crystals and stuff. And I saw a book that's basically outlining the vortexes of Sedona. And I picked it up and I started reading through it and I look, oh my God, that's where we were. And that's why I felt that way. So I totally vibe with what you're saying. And I've had another gentleman on here back back a few years who does a similar thing. He douses for those energy ley lines,
Hmm.
specifically for people who are sensitive to them. So he'll come into your house and he basically douses your house and he'll say, okay, you need to move the bed from that wall to this wall, or you need to put your TV on a different way, or wherever you sit the most, or even eat your meals. You want to be, maybe pushing that table over to this side of the. And at the time he came out here, I was living with my partner, who has since passed away, but she too was an empath and extremely sensitive to these energy lines, and she was still at that point battling cancer. So this was one of the reasons why we brought him here to Oxnard to walk the house and get us, or get her, more in tone with the positive energy forces, not the negative energy forces. So I think I've ranted enough for now, because I'd love to hear
Oh,
more.
no.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
Uh,
more on your thoughts about that.
right. Well, you've given a lovely example of how you are physiologically respond to some kind of change in the environment. We can say, maybe it's electromagnetic, maybe it's something else, but the hair stands up on your arms, on your back of your neck, whatever it is. Different people sense it in different ways. For some people, it may be like an electrical tingling, or it may be a sense of heat or cool. Everybody's feeling it in different ways. Maybe like a magnetic push or pull, and then some people have the ability to see it, which I envy, I think. And so that you can open yourself up to the possibility that you can be more sensitive to the energies as you're more aware of it, more alert to it. You may sense that in even more subtle ways and more subtle places, but you're more likely to feel that as you move from one kind of energy field to another, let's say. And in Sedona, we have a good understanding what the geology is there, and it seems likely that, okay, if it's an electromagnetic, it probably has to do with that iron and those red rocks. That might be one thing, and the shape of the landscape, perhaps. It's got dramatic changes in elevation. I already mentioned how that can affect the electrical fields. So that then secondarily, you touched on this idea that, well, as I put it, anything that can heal can kill. These earth energies aren't necessarily healthful for us. It's important for us to be sensitive to the energies of the place, even if it's a good place for a while. It may not be a good place for long, let's say, or it may be good for somebody at one time and not for another person. So it's important to have an awareness that, haven't been sleeping good in this place. Maybe I could relocate where I sleep, move my bed. That might be an approach. And then there's other approaches. If you do find that you've got an energy line of some sort, and there are numerous different systems. But if you have a line coming through your residence that you don't feel good about, then there are remedies that you can take. And those are kind of analogous to what people are doing in electroculture in a way, because you're going to uh, redirect the energy in some way. You're going to either deflect it in one way, maybe with a steel rod, or attract it in another way, maybe with copper.
Okay. Um, so you talked about people that can see it. Do you meditate at all?
I do.
Okay. Um,
I first started
so one of the
meditating.
things that,
Mhm.
go ahead,
Oh,
please continue.
first started meditating at age 7. I was gazing at a very dim light in a dark room, and I found that to be an enjoyable experience, and didn't know that I'd stumbled upon a meditation technique. But I have been meditating since age 7.
Perfect. Yeah, I didn't know that I was meditating in the many ways that I was. It wasn't until I got deeply involved with Pauline, where she explained a lot of these energies. She was uh, well versed in 17 different modalities. And when I say yoga, this was serious yoga. This wasn't your weekend gift certificate course. This was a 2 year long course where it went from breathing to different techniques, different methods, different teachings. And she also was an Ayurvedic practicer. So she spent time in Pune, India. She was the only non MD there. That should give you an idea of her intelligence or level of intelligence, and a lot of others. She was sound healer. She did guided meditations. There's a whole story behind her. And when we first met, we connected in a meditation. She came into my head. And when the meditation was over, I'd never met her before. When the meditation was over, I sat up. Apparently, I looked like a ghost, and I stared at her, and I was like, "You were in my head." She goes, "I know. I don't know how I got there." That's how connected she was. Dude, it was bizarre. I was like, what the fuck just happened? Because I've been meditating for years, and I've never had anybody come into my meditation. So it was bizarre. But the point I'm trying to make is that she really taught me a lot of these things that I didn't understand, like meditating, like when you walking in your backyard and you're staring at the plants, and you're just kind of like opening yourself up. You're not focused on your breathing. You're not focused on time. You're not focused on anything other than, just looking at the plant and being present with the plant. And this leads into, you know, one of the things that I have been able to do in my life. And again, you're the first person that now makes me understand what it is. I can look at a plant and connect with a plant and see the plant's aura. And it's
Mm,
it's bizarre, dude. It's bizarre. It's like legit. And it's like I thought it was in my head, but now I'm realizing that that's what I'm actually doing, is I'm connecting with that plant and seeing in its aura and magnetic field. And they're different. Every
yeah,
plant's different. They're not the same.
yeah,
It's not like it's
yeah.
a green, right? It can be yellow, it can be red, it can be orange, blue, violet. I've seen it. I've seen all of them.
Wow. So you're
So
seeing it in
that's
color. Yeah.
yes, yes,
It seems,
absolutely.
it would seem that you're a good candidate to learn how to see your earth energies in a similar same way. If you can open up yourself up to that possibility, you're liable to be able to see the earth energies similarly.
Another thing I do is sun gaze. You ever heard of that?
Yeah, yeah.
I do that all the time.
Well,
Usually every
hopefully not
evening.
all the time, just morning and
No,
evening. Yeah.
yeah. No, it's usually pretty much every evening and every morning. I
Oh,
have
nice.
coffee on the back
Nice. Yeah.
porch, and the sun comes up over the rooftops,
Okay.
and it's low enough in the sky that it doesn't hurt. And then at the end of the day as well, and I've learned to communicate with it. I know this sounds fucking bizarre, dude. Like, if it was anybody else, they'd be like, Leighton, you're out of your fucking rocker. But I can stare at it till it turns blue, and then the blue flashes like Morse code. And I can think things in my head, and then it reacts differently. I haven't fully understood how to interpret it yet, but I think like I think I understand like the basics, like yes or no, or we'll see, or let time happen. But it's crazy, dude. I have you seen that pulse and thought about things and it pulsed in different ways?
No, you are. I'm going to say you're a little far afield from Vortex maps, so to speak. Not too far, because I would certainly argue that everything is conscious and divine, including the sun, and that there's every manner of stimulus, whether it's light or color or sound or vibration, every manner of stimulus is contributing to our perfection, our enlightenment. And whatever technique you're using to achieve that kind of single pointedness in your attention, whether you're gazing at a candle flame or the rising sun, whatever that might be, or if you're listening to the sounds of nature or to a chant, whatever your single pointedness is, that's a kind of a meditation. I think a lot of people don't realize that what they're doing might be tennis, anything might be, the thing that brings them into the zone, into the flow, into that meditative state. And that's where, of course, the brainwave frequencies shift, and we're open to these, you could call them paranormal experiences, but they're more like super normal, or as I think Maharishi called them, God powers.
Interesting. So I was about to tell you something I've been working on lately before we started the show. Unfortunately, we had to go live because we were running out of time. But so
Okay, you were talking about some fellow who was able to somehow, he had a technique for measuring the soul. So start with that. Well,
yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
technique?
So
What
yeah, yeah.
technique?
So
Is he
well,
dowsing? What's he doing?
it's no, 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 no. So basically, he's some kind of astrophysicist, and he was studying um, the the human body to try to really figure out what is the soul. And of course, he started at the brain, he moved to the heart, then he looked at the chakras, and his end conclusion was, after many, many years of using instruments, both medical as well as aura measuring stuff, and that really the consciousness or soul of a human is every single cell. So what I'm trying to say is, we know for sure that each individual living cell in a human body has a magnetic or electrical charge, right? We know that we have negative parts and positive parts. Like one of the great guys I love to death, Gerald Pollack, on the fourth phase of water, talks about easy water and how it is negatively charged. And he's got a new hypothesis that he's working on, is that when people get cancer, their level of millivolts is lower. It's down around 10 to 100, whereas a super healthy person has a millivolts of 70 to 80. So you can see that's a pretty big swing. And so he can't prove it yet. He's working on this. But we know for sure, like, the heart is not strong enough to move the blood, the individual blood platelets through, veins and capillaries that are smaller than them. And so the way he's proven that was through easy water and electrical and positive charges. So the little, platelet is negatively charged, high, and the actual capillary is positively charged. So just like a magnetic train or a rail gun, it just shoots this little sucker right through it, instead of clogging and clotting. And this goes back to the understanding of like, you get clots because you don't have the either enough negative charge in the cells or enough positive charge in the capillaries to keep pushing them through. You've lost your charges. So
Okay.
he he started to build a hypothesis and understanding around the fact that he could measure the person, frequency and vibration and charge, and that by cross-referencing all of those components, he could assign technically a musical note, right? A footprint, a fingerprint, a way to determine that that person is different than everybody else around him. We all have our own unique note, and I'm going to use that because I don't have the proper word to describe it. And if I remember correctly, because this was a really deep paper, and I need to read it a couple more times anyway before I can really wrap my head around it. But bottom line was that he somehow was able to cross-reference and essentially create a fingerprint or a note or a way to track that person moving. Um, and it was once that person died, um, the soul leaves you, right? When you when your body finally physically shuts down, like it's no longer functioning, no brain waves, no breath, no blood flow, no heartbeat, right? At that point, there is a transition. Like we've seen, there was a gentleman that measured the weight of a body on an atomic scale, and at the point of death, there was a fraction change that occurred. They
Well, let
lost a
me,
tiny fraction of
if,
weight. Go ahead.
if I
Yeah, build
may,
on.
if I think what I need to do is redirect you a little bit, actually, or just reframe, because you know, all of that is very overlaps with what I call the vortex effect. But again, my expertise is not in the area of the soul. But as an alchemist, I'm very much interested in all the things we're doing with water that we can then drink the water, we can give it to our livestock, we can give it to our plants. And so that's where the what I'm calling earth magic or vortexes, that's where the overlap is with agriculture, with healing. But I'm the and I have opinions about the soul, but I'm not prepared to espouse my opinions about the soul. My career has been really, even though there's so much that overlaps with the vortex research, whether it be UFOs or cryptic creatures or whatever it might be, uh, it's a matter of moving things off and kind of moving things to the side. So like I'm interested in psychic experiences, but how does that overlap with the power of place?
Yeah. So anyway, because he was an astrophysicist, he was able to use a different instrument to scan the solar system for that note, and he found it. So what he's basically saying is that we don't die, right? We are energy. Energy cannot be killed or destroyed. But he goes back to the idea of like planet Earth and your existence here is God's school. So that you once you've passed all of the necessary steps and hit enlightenment, then you're allowed to naturally move on to some other task or maybe it's a community energy. I don't know, but dude, this it's just ironic that we're talking, after I've been reading that paper recently, and I'll try to reel myself back in here because I did go way off the fucking left field, but that's what this podcast is all about. Is going outside the box hard, dude.
Well,
so
yeah, if
so
I could
let's
reel you
talk
back
more about
in, yeah.
yeah
Uh,
let's talk more about your research and what you're doing.
Well, I was going to actually stitch it together a little bit because I have been in contact recently with a fellow who does a soul reading of sorts, and he has a system where he's, I think, dowsing. I'm sure of it. He's dowsing in some manner to assign all kinds of scores to different aspects of soul, and he has a quite a kind of complex belief system around what a soul is and where it comes from and goes to and how many you have. And I can't say I agree, but I have a profound interest in dowsing and the various methods that people are using to tap into uh, earth energies, human energies, energies of plants. And I think I've lost Leighton.
I'm not sure if he got a phone call. His camera isn't working anyways, so
Okay, well, um, I'm prepared to roll with punches. Thanks for showing up, Ken.
yep, just keep going. Oh, he's kind of
No, I think it has to do with blue tape.
yeah. Well, the
No,
blue
no,
tape.
my son blew up my phone. He just kept calling. I kept hanging up. He called. I hang up because he forgets I'm on a podcast. So anyway, I'm sorry about that. But can you roll back to where you
No,
lost?
no worries. Where did I leave off? Help me out.
Oh shit. You were just about to go down a rabbit hole of with your friend who essentially is talking about
Oh, the
attaching
soul.
properties to
Right.
souls.
So thank you. So yeah, I was tying it back into dowsing that I had heard from somebody who had a whole elaborate belief system built up around the soul, and if you had more than one, and where it was coming from and going to, and how it was building karma points or losing karma points. And it's of profound interest to me the method of dowsing and various kinds of dowsing, because that's where the overlap is for me in earth energies and human energies. So, so the reason I'm excited to talk to you is that twofold for sure. At first, I was just excited to talk about aquaponics, but now I'm hearing that you're sensitive to earth energies and all manner of things. So, delighted. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And look, I won't hog the microphone. We'll get into aquaponics, I promise, because
Oh,
that's a
no worries, no worries. But
that's
let me tie it together. I think I can
yep.
kind of give it a nice uh, panorama here. So I have a little bit of an elevator pitch. There's an infinite amount of energy available everywhere, all the time, for our physical healing, for our psychic opening, and for harmonizing the planet. So I did write a book which is called Stonehenge Gardening Tips Using Earth Energies in Your Garden. And it does address these different aspects or components of ancient monuments in general, and about how all those different components contributed to this kind of energetic footprint of the ancient monument, how it was built on intersectional ley lines, perhaps, how it used sacred geometry, it had patterns relating to other monuments, the materials that it was built with, how it was built, the colors, the electricity in the ground, all these things together come together to create a very fertile environment. And you can use these same techniques at the scale of your own garden. You can build a henge in your garden. The henge is two parts. It's often a henge technically is just a ring and ditch with either the ditch on the outside or the inside. That's a henge. The stones are a different part. So we can break it all down, deconstruct. And these monuments very often have a very advanced or developed element of hydraulics. They've got water storage, water channels, underground structures for water. So if you think of like Lake Titicaca or the Great Pyramid, the Nile, and the underground channels, and the etc., there's often a water component to them. There could potentially be energizing that water for their agriculture. So all these things come together for making the earth more alive. And when we're talking about uh, healing ourselves using earth energies, we're talking about bringing ourselves into direct contact with the ocean, with the earth, with the wet grass. We're really talking about earthing, grounding our own electrical fields, breathing the air, having an environment with, perhaps you need a waterfall in your house so that you have more negative ions in the air. You're going to bring in some houseplants, maybe bring in some crystals. You're going to, in fact, emulate the earth with some kind of tech device, technique, technology to enhance your life energy. And just as you say, this electrical charge of the EZ water, that seems to be a very important part of course, our neurology. How much of our brain is water? And actually, every cell of our brain has a bit of magnetite in it. I like to highlight that because that's a potential mechanism for us to have a magnetic sense. So it's not uncommon, I think, for people to be sensitive to I know it's not uncommon for people to be sensitive to the energy of the earth or the energy of place or plants or even animals. It's not something maybe that we're widely discussing, but you can meditate at these energetic places as a way of actually strengthening your psychic abilities. You can sit with a tree, and many people have really close connections to trees. And Montauk Chia wrote a beautiful article called Befriending the Trees. And that's all about that. And I'd just like to offer that to folks. If they will email me at my website, I'll send them a link to that article. My email address, if I may, it's energy@vortexmaps.com, ENERGY, energy@vortexmaps.com. So I'll answer every email, and I'll send you a link to download a free ebook as well.
Nice. Ken, if you could type that up and then just flash it periodically, I'd appreciate it. Yeah, Ken's great at doing this behind the scenes
Thanks,
stuff.
Ken.
So
He's
that's
pretty good
funny
in
you should.
front of the camera, too.
Yeah, he's an okay guy. So Pauline, when she first brought me into her life, we would always go down to the river, which was a like bubbling, rolling river in Connecticut, and with all these little waterfalls. And on the way there, she would always stop and hug her tree lily. And
Yeah.
at first, I was like, so what's special about that tree, right? Why, all of these trees around us, why did you pick that one and name her Lily? And she went into a long tirade about that we can bond with them and that we can transfer energy. And at first I was a little like, okay, it's a little woo for me, but again, this was the beginning of our journey. Like, by the time she passed away, she had taught me so much that when I went back for her life celebration, of course I went straight to fucking Lily and had a fucking deep cry, my friend, as I hugged Lily and told her of Pauline's passing and that she wouldn't be back. And it was powerful, dude. It was really fucking powerful. If you can hear it in my voice, I'm trying to hold it together, but
Yeah.
that again, what you're saying is fact, and it's only when you're open to these kinds of things that you can connect all the way in, man, all the way in.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I'll double down on that and say that um, you can put your hands an inch or two away from the trunk of a tree, and you can learn to sense the energy of that tree. You may feel it, as I said before, as hot or cold, or as temperature, or tingling. And as you move your hand around the trunk of that tree, you'll find that it does vary.
Mhm.
And I think you'll find that your left hand feels different from your right hand. So in that way, you can get to know the energy of a tree. And uh, people, in my experience, most people can very readily be taught to see the energy between their hands. There's an energy exchange that happens between left and right hand, especially if you have a male volunteer and a female volunteer and they put their hands a couple inches apart. If you have a good lighting situation, you're able to kind of gaze past the space between the hands. May look to you like kind of a mirage or heat waves. That's common. And then you can expand that skill. You can feel your own energy and the energy of other people, and even the energy of the earth, I think, quite readily. And then you can learn to work with that energy.
Yes, Pauline was a master of Reiki, and when after that meditation happened, a year later, I was going to work, walked out, slipped on some black ice, and slammed my back and fell underneath the car, and basically, crawled myself back into the car. I had surgery back in 2001, so it's no joke. I have a bulging disc above and below, and so I crawled back into my car, um, drove to the hospital. Of course, they jacked me up on friggin' Percocet and steroids and all this other crap. And I went home and basically was in bed for a few days. And it was getting worse, dude. And I just got so pissed at the pharmaceuticals. I was like, F this stuff. I'm not taking any more of this crap. I locked myself in a room for 3 days with just water, no computer, no phone, and detoxed, right? And so when I was finished detoxing, I drove down to that center where I did the cacao meditation ceremony or guided meditation with Pauline, and I walked in and I recognized Christy as the owner, which is another weird part of that because when Christy saw Pauline and I look at each other after that meditation, she's like, "Oh, you guys are old friends." Talking about hair going up. Anyway, she looked at me and she goes, "Wow, wait, you really don't look good." And I said, "No, this is the situation. I need help. I need restorative yoga or some kind of stretching. I need acupuncture. Do you have anybody here that does Reiki?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, you remember Pauline? Well, Pauline does Reiki. She does the restorative yoga. She can do some sound healing with you, and then Jampa will do your acupuncture and your Chinese herbs, and we'll get you back up as quick as we can." Well, I spent literally 3 days a week there for about 3 weeks, and I was cured, man. I was good to go. But Pauline, now I've had Reiki before, plenty of times in my life. When Pauline put her hands together over my back, it felt like a hot pan, a searing hot pan on my back. That's how powerful she was at Reiki, and she would do a similar thing with the tree. And if you looked between her hands and the tree, it was like you said, it got all wavy, it got blurry. And that was when I realized, God damn, this woman's a witch. I lovingly teased her that she was a witch, but she really wasn't. She was a very much in connection with the earth energy that you're talking about on many, many different levels.
Yeah, folks, especially folks who are already doing polarity therapy, already doing Reiki, already can feel the energy of a crystal or a magnet. These folks are highly likely to be able to kind of expand their skill set there and be able to sense at a deeper level. And I'll suggest that that tree, it's going to have a certain electrical vibration to it. And a tree next to it's going to have a slightly different electrical vibration to it. And if you can actually touch two trees at the same time, you can actually perhaps be sensitive to forming a circuit between those two different energies. So
Very
that's
cool.
something you can try.
Very cool. Love it. That's something I'm gonna play with for sure. So let's talk about crystals a little bit. So a good friend of mine, Andy Lopez, who has spot on this channel on, I think, Wednesday mornings with Ken.
Hmm.
He comes from a background in, I, I guess that they called them gypsies. I'm not sure the proper name to call his mother, but she was a medical healer, spiritual healer, and she would take gemstones. So not like high value gemstones, but rubies, beryl of all kinds, and crush them up and make elixirs for her patients and heal them that way. And Andy learned how to do that. And so, what are your feelings about the different properties of the different colored stones, semi-precious or precious? You think they're like an antenna?
Wow. Exactly like an antenna. Those semi-precious stones are going to have a relatively pure vibration. You can think of quartz crystal that's been grown in a lab that's 99.99% pure. It's going to vibrate at a certain frequency, and that's what makes it so useful in electronics. And we can think of Marcel Vogel as being one of the greatest of all time in terms of working with crystals and faceting them in unique ways. We know quartz crystal in nature tends to have this six-sided geometry to it. In any case, other gems will have other vibrational frequencies for sure, and that is, I think, among the highest levels of alchemy. There is to work with those precious gems, and you don't have to consume them or destroy them. You can use them in gem elixirs. You can transfer that vibrational frequency to, let's say, a mother essence, and then use that to activate the water that you're using many gallons on your garden, let's say. So there's energetic ways of using, let's say, Bach flower remedies or homeopathic remedies or crystal elixirs on your garden for sure.
So you ever heard of dragonfly earth medicine?
Dragonfly?
Yeah, dragonfly earth medicine.
No, I haven't.
That's a very, very powerful couple. They've been in the cannabis industry since the, I don't know, 80s, 90s, maybe even a little earlier. They ended up leaving the United States, moving up to a place in Canada where it was safe, let's say, to continue their work in cannabis as medicine. Again, they make all kinds of different medicinal products, including mushroom extracts. And I'm not talking the magic ones. I'm talking like the ones that you harvest in the forest. Um, they put together a number of different products for people that need the natural path version of real medicine. And they talk a lot about crystals. Like they'll put a crystal underneath a cannabis seedling. And what's really cool is at the end of the season, they'll cut the plant down, and then they'll pull out this crystal that's surrounded by the roots. So it's like a little club or a magic wand, or again, another tool in the toolbox of what you're talking about. In this understanding these energy sources. They would be a fantastic couple for you to talk to about your work. And
Hmm.
maybe we should have them and you on this show at some point in the future, because you guys, like, I don't know as they would describe it the same way, but they understand it exactly as you're talking. Everything you've said is basically, I've heard, come out of their mouths in different ways or forms or shapes.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, they're really, like, when I first met them, I was like, oh my god, these guys are like wood elves. Like I could just feel them. Like they didn't belong in public; they belonged in the forest. And the more I got to know them, the more I realized that, yeah, these two are very, very powerful people, and on
Yeah.
another plane, another level
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
than humans.
I had in the late 80s, I had the good fortune of working with Guru Das, who wrote the books on gem elixirs. There's
Okay.
a couple encyclopedic books on gem elixirs, 2 volumes by an author named Guru Das. So I had the good fortune to work with Guru Das. But to pull the conversation back to earth energies now, the quartz crystal plays a real important part in what I'm calling the vortex effect and contributing to these electrical currents in the soil. We know that quartz crystal is incredibly abundant, underlays the whole state of Arkansas and then some Oklahoma, this one unitary quartz body. And we know that the oceanic tides actually deform the continental plates. So we can think of this daily cycle, the tide cycle, as actually creating a continental tide where there's this variations of pressure on the continental plate. So all that, and quartz is piezoelectric. In other words, it generates an electrical charge under pressure. And of course, underground, quartz crystals under pressure. So you can take a pair of electrodes and you can run a current through the ground and you can measure the Earth's conductivity and receptivity. And that'll vary over time according to various cycles, not just the tidal cycle, perhaps. And then you'll have faults. And where there's these faults, you'll find that perhaps there's different kinds of soil or rock coming together, and that'll create an electrical discontinuity. And so you've got these electrical properties going on in the ground, and we may be experiencing these daily variations in those cycles. And the quartz crystal, the piezoelectric quartz crystal, is going to be just one of these many varying components in this whole composition of the electromagnetic field.
Maybe talk about what Dennis's boys did lately.
Yeah, yeah. I'll get into that in a minute. But it's funny you should say that. So there's this place. Have you ever been to California?
Oh yeah, born and raised. Yeah.
You've been up to Ojai?
Not Ojai. It's on my bucket list.
All
Say
right,
more.
dude.
Say
You gotta
more.
go. Yeah, you gotta go up there, man. There are vortexes up there for sure.
Okay, what do you think? What do you think causes these vortexes? Harkening back to your very first statement about the energy you felt at that first place, what part is geophysical, let's say, and what part might be cultural or consciousness or because of ceremony that happened there or ritual objects? Like, what can you possibly differentiate between those two things?
Well, I think that we are always attracted to places like that, and I don't care like how far back in time you go, whether this was, you know, Neanderthal or whatever. The humans tend to find these places, and I gotta believe it's both conscious as well as energy. So the crazy part is that even like even these crazy scientists, they knew to build that Rocketdyne on that sacred site. Why would they do that, right? Why would they build this rocket factory and nuclear bomb and all this crazy destructive human shit? Why would they choose a
Yeah,
sacred
okay.
site,
Well,
right?
let's go there. Okay.
All right.
So it does seem that there's a global pattern of energy lines. You can think of them like equators, great circles that encircle the Earth. And they, in one model, it's a combination of the icosahedron and the dodecahedron inscribed within the globe.
Mhm.
And that gives you, with the North and South Pole, that gives you 62 geometric points around the Earth. Now, this all harks back to that early work of Ivan Sanderson, some Russian researchers, and that book about the Bermuda Triangle. This is not just one, but there's these other ones and this geometric pattern around the Earth, right? So if we have this grid around the Earth, this energy grid or this pattern of ley lines or great circles, then what, why, how? Well, the Earth is this spinning electromagnetic thing. It's got this part of the core that is molten. There's part of the core that is actually crystal because of this slow cooling that's going on. Those are rotating at a certain speed, but inside there, it's like this giant washing machine because the mantle's rotating at a different speed. So we've got this electromagnetic planet. It's spinning around. Of course, it has some kind of an electromagnetic field, and we have various models of it, some more useful models than others. But the idea is that at these geometric locations, that geometry manifests sometimes as a deep sea trench where the new ocean is being formed. And those oceanic plates are slowly separating, or sometimes it manifests as some kind of mountain peak. But in almost every one of these 62 cases, it's this unique geologic features. Many of those have been built on by ancient civilizations. You have ancient monuments at many of these geometric points. So you have to ask, well, how did that happen? Were they consciously aware? Was it due to their advanced technology? Was it an advanced ancient civilization? My vote's for yes on that. So at these geometric grid points, you may find ore and mineral deposits. That tends to create a unique soil type. That tends to create unique plant species, and then you have unique animal species, and all those things attract human culture. So very often you find these points are nature reserves or parks. So yes to everything you said.
It's funny that you talk about that, the unique conditions that provide this abundant place, right? So I often preach about where the rivers meet the ocean. And if you notice where man settles, it's always where the river meets the ocean because of that unique condition. You have the compost tea coming down in the spring, fertilizing the land. You got all the fish coming in and doing their thing. And you have, both incredible abundance of, these very diverse different types of animals and fish and plants. So, I think you're spot on that. So back to Ojai. So if you go to
Oh yeah.
Ojai, there's this road called the 33, and it goes from uh, down really the 101 in Ventura all the way up to the top of the mountain. I think it's called Rose's Ledge up there, which
Okay.
has a really unique waterfall.
Yeah.
The waterfall is always running, even when it was drought. And there's a river up there that was always running, even in the middle of the drought. And the water the place is magic, all right. But that they call that I think it's White Ledge. So if you do come to Ojai, you got to go up to Roses Falls and down to the white ledges, these white rocks that stick out of the mountain. Really, really super impressive. But as you go up the 33, you'll notice that they had to follow this river, and this river carved out a mountain, and on one side of the road as you're going up, and this is an impressive deep gorge, the rock is standing absolutely plumb straight up. This vein of rock. I mean, you could put a level on it and it's spot on. You talk about powerful areas like where your hair stands up. I got out there. I freaked out when I first went through there. And I was like, Pauline, we got to pull over. We got to pull over. She goes, there's no place to pull over. I go, well, as soon as there is, pull over. I got to go back there. I went in. I went as close to that thing as I could get. And I was like, oh my God, the energy here is nuts. So there you go. Right. And I don't believe there's a fault underneath that. But think of the pressure that took to take a layer that was horizontal and turn it plumb, perfectly friggin' level, upright. As far as you can see, it goes up.
Well, okay. I might not have fully followed everything you said, so I want to check what I heard you say. A couple of things. But before I do that, actually, give me a second to just back up a little bit, because there was a piece that I left unfinished to respond to what you said a minute ago. And that is that these energetic points, these grid points, often they do have ore and mineral deposits and those do tend to be valuable. And secondly, we do find very often, aside from parks and such, we find government property, military installations, and nuclear material and such. So I'm not even certain what location you were talking about that had that sun dagger, but I understood that it was on a NASA Rocketdyne property.
Yep.
Was this in like Santa Barbara, California area?
No, it's Simi Valley.
Is it coastal? No.
No, it's Simi
Okay.
Valley, so it's very
Yeah.
arid. They have some of the coolest rock formations up there that you've ever seen. It's called not the Calabasas, I can't remember the name of it. It's a rock formation that's unique to California.
Okay, but it wasn't a military base.
No, it was. All right, so I'll
It
back
was
it
a
up.
military base.
Yeah,
Okay,
they
yeah.
so
Yeah.
the Spanish basically pushed all the Indians, or I should call them, I don't even know what to call them anymore, indigenous tribal people, off of the site. There were 3 tribes that would unite there every winter solstice,
Sure.
and trade and party it up, right?
Yeah.
And so by the early 1900s, 1901, 1903, somewhere around there, basically all the indigenous were no longer there. They'd all either been pushed
Yeah.
north or west or south, but they no longer came to this sacred site to celebrate. And I know this because I know one of the Shumash, a member of the Shumash tribe, that ironically enough, I was working with her on the bridge project, and I started talking about this crazy place up in Santa Susana Field Lab, and she goes, "Oh, I go up there for winter solstice." And I was like, "Whoa!" Anyway, so for whatever reason, those people were pushed off of that site, and it was kind of left abandoned. Some kids would go up there and party and shit, and at some point, the tribes were concerned about the fact that could get damaged, like destructed, vandalized. And so I believe they reached out to whoever had taken it over in the 40s, and requested that they put the fence up with a barbed wire on it. And that again was where they set up Rocketdyne, which is the rocket boosters for NASA. They tested them up there in Simi Valley, and my neighbor lived in Simi Valley, and she grew up there. And she said, "Oh my God, when they tested one of those things at night, it was nuts, Leighton. It was so loud. The whole mountain glue. It was like crazy weird." And they also set up the first nuclear reactor up there, and that melted down and polluted part of Simi Valley, and nobody was told about it until until it leaked out later. And then there was all kinds of fury, like Boeing, NASA, DOE are all like suing each other, and who's going to clean it up. And it's a mess, dude. It's an absolute mess. For 10 years, they've been promising to clean the mess up. And yes, they did remove like the core and a lot of the highly radioactive stuff, but the soil's still polluted. I mean, they were burning mercury on top of that mountain. They had a burn pit, dude. They just throw mercury in there. They throw, different types of, elements for building very, very high explosives. As a matter of fact, 3 guys blew themselves up in the burn pit accidentally. There's a lot of chaos that occurred up there. But yeah, that's on a very, very high level military site on a very, very sacred ancient site.
Okay, well, let's move forward to Ojai now. You're describing, first of all, a desert where the electromagnetic field is subject to a lot of positive ions in the air, and by positive I mean electrically positive. These tend to
that would Ojai is not desert. Ojai is this beautiful little valley, lush valley.
But it's an oasis in the desert, and essentially it's an oasis in the desert.
Well, yeah, as you get through that little piece of tunnel in the river where it starts to widen out. Now you're getting up into the desert.
So that gives you that change in the electromagnetic field,
Exactly. Right
and
between
here,
the two.
to underscore what you said earlier about where the river meets the sea, anywhere where you have this interface between two ecosystems, you have a lot of richness going on. But here we're talking about you have an area that's got a lot of positive ions in the air. It's got these hot, dry winds like the Santa Ana winds that are demonstrably not good for people's health and emotional state. And then you have Ojai, which is this, like as you say, it's like a lush oasis, contrasting to the nearby area. So you have that kind of
Interface.
interface, the dynamism that creates. And then you clearly have a lot of, let's say, consciousness communities gathering in the Ojai area.
Yeah, dude, it's
Spiritual communities.
a
Yeah.
very spiritual area. And it has been like Sedona. A lot of people migrated there, and that were into the woo-woo stuff, for lack of better words. I don't like to call it a cult because it's more about mental consciousness, spiritual consciousness. As a matter of fact, the burners started Burning Man. They were all Hyans.
Okay.
Those guys started Burning Man.
Hmm.
Anyway, so yeah, so you're that would be the best way to describe it, is that rock that stands straight up is literally like the black line between the white and the black on the yin yang, or the gray line between the white and the black. Very,
Oh,
very
wow.
sensitive.
Okay. Now, when you see rock, that you're describing rock standing straight up, but you were saying like it was originally sedimentary rock because it was
Oh
laid
yeah.
down horizontal. So then it was subject to these profound tectonic forces, either uplift or subduction, that left it in the vertical. So whatever electrical magnetic field it had originally in sedimentary rock, it's varies what kind of electromagnetic field it has, but it's been flipped on edge. So you're sensitive to that. You can feel that, and you may be able to feel that even when the landscape just looks undifferentiated. And where that often happens is like in an area where there's a river that has left, over time it had a lot of meanders that had left oxbows and filled in
Mhm.
the sedimentation there. So now rivers are often, they're very controlled. They don't, there's cities built up around them. They don't allow the rivers to meander anymore. But that city's been built like on this sedimentary plain where if you were to see the underlying soil, you'd see that it is highly varied, and you may be sensitive to those kinds of changes, even if they're not visible on the surface.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the hardest thing for me to comprehend when I was standing there at this interface, looking up at this friggin' rock going straight up, was how could that happen without destroying everything around it? And how did the water continue to cut through this and create a river? I mean, it's just like there had to be some other forces involved. In other words, I don't believe that rock. Look, I am a buff geologist. I used to cut marble and granite for very wealthy people. I got to work with some of the most expensive stones that came from all over the planet. And because I was like a little rock junkie as a kid, I would research on where that rock came from, what were its properties, so I better understood how to cut it, polish it, and manipulate it. Because if I got like I had to get these green, what we call them, serpentines,
Mhm.
and there were different types. There's stuff from Vermont. There's all over the world has serpentines. Some of the serpentines are so sensitive when you cut them, they actually expand and explode. So I needed to research to understand. Okay, I can't carve this piece of stone for you because it's not going to accept the techniques that I have that I can use to do it. But I can give you this other stone that looks almost identical, but it doesn't have those properties, right? So I would call that vein uh, metamorphic, if not igneous. but the color of it, because it's light colored compared to the other stones, I can't for sure say that it's igneous. I would have to say common sense would say that it was metamorphic. It's where the igneous rock came in contact with a sedimentary rock, and it shifted and called metamorphic rock. And
Okay,
metamorphic is
I'm
is a
following you.
is a
Okay.
catch-all for a lot of these or unusual or undescribable uh, rocks. And again, for it to be standing straight up in this crevice, this where the rivers just cut a hole through this cliff. Uh, it's almost like it had to happen, like early, like billions of years ago. Like maybe it's even part of Gondwana. Like it didn't when it separated, it traveled all the way over here
Right.
in that form, and the river took millions or perhaps billions of years to carve its way through it. You
Well,
follow me?
I would think I'm following you, and I would think that if you were to Google uh, and look for a geologic map of Ojai, that little piece would stand out very clearly. It'd be its own little color, perhaps.
Yeah,
And
it's crazy, dude.
the other thing to notice when you're in the landscape, if you're not a geologist, that sometimes you'll see these features that are more properly identified as dikes, where there's been a material that's intruded in a
Mhm.
crack of a younger material and then hardened, fossilized, not fossilized, but turned to stone, petrified, basically, right? So
Yep.
it might be, let's say it's magma or lava, it's quartz crystal, and it's intruded in essentially an older rock, right? And it's the younger rock intruding into the older rock, and then that'll leave a dike that'll be, a kind of an unusual vertical feature. But point being that as we move through the landscape, we are exposing ourselves to who knows what, in a way, some very ancient kinds of rocks, and more importantly, perhaps the magnetic field of lava is an imprint of the magnetic field of the Earth at the time that the magma cooled to lava. So lava is a profound kind of magnetic material. And as we move through a lava field or the vicinity of a volcano, which we do in the Ring of Fire, Pacific Northwest, we're exposing our energy field to many variations in the electromagnetic field. We might even go into a lava tube. Then again, the electromagnetic field around us would be different. And then,
So on,
mhm,
on your point of lava, right? So there's the densest rock, or most often the densest rock found, is black, and it's called basalt. And
sure,
it's so dense that the continents actually float on top of it. All right, and there are examples where the basalt has gotten weathered away and exposed or uplifted and pushed to the surface. There are places all over the world that you can actually physically see the basalt, even though it's still, our continents are floating on it. So, and when you look at a volcano, what you're seeing is that intrusion, like you said. It's like a pimple. It builds up to a head, and then it pops. And as soon as it pops, um, you are throwing a highly volatile form of rock in liquid or plastic. And when it gets exposed to water or air, it literally explodes and turns into ash. And that ash is what forms clay. And it formed a clay all up and down the west coast here, which is part of the reason they have mudslides and all kinds of other weird geological things that happen out here. But when you really think about, like, you know what is the makeup of that lava before it turned to ash and clay, or literally comes down as the burn stuff. What is it called? Pyroclastic. I'm sorry, my geological terms are a little bit off these days. I haven't been doing it for a long
Pyroclastic
time.
flow.
Yeah. That stuff that you cut yourself on, right? Um,
Oh,
that's
obsidian.
well, no, obsidian's different. Obsidian is
Oh,
glass.
okay.
Obsidian
Stuff you
is
cut
volcanic
yourself on.
glass. This is
Yeah,
the
well,
stuff you see on Hawaii where it's all pocked and
yeah, you're
porous,
right.
cut you up like a butter. Um, that stuff is like the leftover. That's like the burnt toast after all the minerals have been spewed and turned into volatilized into gas or ash. So that is a whole cool phenomenon. Like vulcanry is crazy because depending on where you are on the earth as that pinball build and you have that intrusion is tearing apart the minerals that were there, both sedimentary, metamorphic, and igneous, for however long, but it's tearing through those and mixing it together, which is why you get so many unique and beautiful different colored materials. And this gets even more nuts. Like there there is this understanding that, like, if you take a gem, like a valuable gem, like a ruby, right, or emerald, any of the beryl family, and you cut it and you put it under Ken, what was that microscope our buddy had? It was
Yeah,
epifluorescent, right?
yeah, epifluorescent. Yeah.
Epifluorescent. So the epifluorescent microscope, when you scope a ruby, or again, not diamonds, let's stick with the colored stones, it's black. It goes fucking black. But when you hit these other stones, you can actually see the colors in them. They look black under regular light. Like, it looks like a black rock, but it isn't until you put it under epifluorescent light that you can see the rainbow of colors in it. And if you look at, like, lot of the uh, ancients didn't use the rubies and the emeralds on their, they used them on their, their dress, like their jewelry and their crowns and all that, but they built their monuments or ritual sites with these other rocks that look black, but when you shine them, with a black light or epifluorescent, they actually change colors. What are your thoughts on that one? Are they too a more powerful antenna than even some of the other crystals that we worship as humans?
I don't know, Leighton. I'm not quite sure how to respond from my, area of expertise on the vortexes. That's just beyond my area of expertise. I hadn't heard of it before, so
Yeah,
so
well,
not sure what to say.
yeah, I'm sorry, dude. I don't mean to, like, throw shit at you, but I mean, you know, I I'm outside the box most of my life, so I tend to drift to these things, and I love to kind of brainstorm, chop it up about, like, well, what are your thoughts on that? And so I'm sorry I took you, a little bit too far out of the box, but let's reel it back. Let's reel it back in. Do you want to talk about aquaponics, or you want to stay on the vortexes? You
Well,
can always come back. You can come back, and we can do aquaponics if you want.
I'm about to initiate. I am initiating an aquaponics system here in my neighborhood, so I'm pretty excited about that. I'm considering what my first steps are going to be. I have a partner in the business, so he will be involved. It's not yet a business, but in my imagination, it will be one day. And so I'm going to be involving another person in the process. And I'm thinking that the first steps are to sanctify the place. So we walked the property a couple days ago and was familiarized ourselves with it. And I'd like to go back and actually walk the boundaries. And I'm not a big ceremonialist, but walking the boundaries is a great start for sanctifying a place. I might bring a bell or a drum or some such thing, or I might use my voice, and I might use some kind of a stone, perhaps a crystal or some other thing. You might say a device or it might be a ribbon to help mark and establish and anchor the corners. And then the next step might be to establish a center. And there's a number of ways of doing that. And then having that establish the edges in the center, then when I set up my aquaponics system, our aquaponics system, it's not the only thing on the location. There's a house there and some other bits. Then the site that I choose is going to determine everything. So I just want to take that first step, that first shovelful, in the most sacred way I can, as the first step in doing the aquaponics system.
Great approach, my friend. That's beautiful. So I'm sure you've heard of biodynamics or permaculture.
Yes. And I've studied permaculture. Aquaponics, in case you haven't heard, is an ecosystem where you're raising fish in the same system with plants, and there's many different ways of doing that. And I'm intending to use tilapia to grow my own protein in the most sustainable and regenerative way possible. And I've got some experience in doing that. And the permaculture model is lovely model.
Hey, he's got another phone call coming in.
That's all right. I'm going to take 2 minutes. Okay, Ken, you're on your own.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Aquaponics, guys, is a phenomenal system. Check what is legal in your area for the fish species that you are going to want to use, because not all areas allow you to use tilapia or different game fish, etc. And then your environment really dictates the type of fish. You need a warm temperature for tilapia, where a sturgeon or something like that will handle different temperature ranges. So if you're going to be running tilapia, remember they're coming from the Nile, so they're a warm water fish. You need to be able to maintain your temperature if you're going to be using tilapia. So you want to make sure you have redundant systems for maintaining temperature. And of course, there's always the regulations that you have to go through to use different fish. So make sure if you're setting up an aquaponics system that you have that in mind. Like when I built mine, I actually went to the fish store and I literally got what's called a feeder fish, so little baby goldfish that you would feed to other fish. That's actually the fish I used in my aquaponics system to maintain it for the nitrite to nitrate cycle. Leighton, you can go on a little bit. I can see his shadow, so he's back already.
Yeah, sorry about that. He blew my phone up again. Anyway, I don't know if you heard Ken talk about permitting, and I think California is a place that you can't grow tilapia because their fear is that they'll escape and get into the waterways and then be an invasive species. I ran into this in Vermont when I was setting up a facility there, and even though the average temperature of Vermont was, I believe, 29 degrees, because it gets to well below 30 below in the winter, and as high as 100 in the summer, but the cold months are a lot longer. So the average is down to about something ridiculous like 29 degrees. And so I argued with him. I said, look, this fish cannot survive in water temperatures less than 50. So how can I possibly create an invasive species in Vermont? And their argument was, well, if it escapes during the summer and swims all the way down the Connecticut River to the Connecticut coast, it could survive. You know, again, regulatory nonsense. And if you're out here in California, you're gonna hit a lot of that stuff. So I would say pick perhaps an endangered species. Um,
Are you
that,
in California?
yeah, yeah.
Ah, okay. I'm in Oregon.
Okay,
And,
all right.
and several years back, Oregon decided that tilapia no longer required an invasive species permit, but they only required a transportation permit.
Nice. So if you want to connect with the people I consider the best, bar none, for any kind of fish tank setups, reach out to Santa Fe Community College. Speak to Charlie Schultz. He runs the program down there, the controlled environmental um, courses. He's the protege of a gentleman named Dr. James Rakosi, who created the UVI system, which is by far the most bulletproof of all of the aquaponic setups, because you have one tank that has the fingerlings, and then you have one tank that you're harvesting. So you're constantly rotating through, so you never have to go through we call startup, where you don't have a lot of nutrient, you have just a lot of little fish. Um, and Charlie can build on it for you, but I highly recommend that you do use him as a resource for whether you just have questions or you want access to, really good brood stock.
Well, that'll be on my bucket list when I get to Santa Fe.
Oh, there you go, dude. Stop in San Sedona on the way down.
Yeah. So the parts about aquaponics that I find so exciting is that overlap that we get between the subtle energy and the aquaponics. So it's, let's say you've got an aquaponic system already set up at whatever scale. How are we going to bring in subtle energies into that system? Or let's say you've got a garden space. How do you bring in this vortex energies or subtle energies into that system? So I think your listeners will be familiar with the idea, as I have a vague idea, of electroculture. And that would be using some kind of passive system. Perhaps it's a coiled copper wire, or perhaps it's a pipe that's maybe hollow, or maybe has some materials packed inside it, as a way of bringing energy into your garden. That would be a couple of techniques. But I would suggest, and I suggest in Stonehenge Gardening Tips, that you can bring in the energy of the stars in various ways. One way would be to plant in the pattern of a constellation. You can bring in the energy of the sun and moon by aligning your garden in that fashion. You might want to align your garden to true north, or you might want to align it to magnetic north, or some variation of that. But once we've got our fish tank or our garden, and we've attended to the chemical needs, then we can perhaps attend to the finer things and bring in these subtler energies, whether it's magnetism or electricity. And I caution people to be really careful about bringing in lava rock into their garden. You mentioned basalt, which is black. It's a different composition from andesite, which is named after the Andes Mountains. They form different kinds of volcanoes. One forms cone volcano, one forms more of a shield volcano. I tend to get them mixed up. But in any case, in their natural state, they leave this magnetic footprint, beautiful thing on a magnetic map. But if you're bringing it into the garden, then you're bringing in these magnetic materials And it'd be nice to have your psychic sight to actually see how you're impacting your space. The color, too, is an important part of that vortex effect. I don't usually enjoy presence of volcanic rock in a garden any more than I do like metals in a garden. I find those too hard. And in the same way, if you're bringing the element of fire into your garden or perhaps your backyard, you want to do that in a real conscious way according to the energies there. And I'll say, if I may, we'll just back up a little bit to, you happen to mention serpentine. And serpentine is one of these things I think of as being a vortex marker. Because where it occurs, you do get unique soil types and unique plant and animal species. And we have some of that in Southern Oregon here. And so those are, when you're looking at a map, let's say, and you're looking for, I'll call them vortex markers or vortexes, you're looking for points that have high elevation, points that have low elevation, points that have cultural features, historic features, parks perhaps, unusual plant and animal species, other kinds of features like that are going to be good vortex markers. And then sometimes if you get a map that's you've marked up with enough features, then patterns may begin to emerge. And that's where I really get excited, where we start to see these patterns of energy points, circles, sometimes equilateral triangles, stars with various numbers of points. And all these elements, again, whether it's electricity or magnetism or color or geometry or astronomy, astrology, you can bring all of those into your garden or aquaponics system.
That's very true. Dragonfly is all about that, setting them up, to polar points, to sacred geometry, and then making sure that the plants that you're planting in the different components of your garden are actually helping to, not only stimulate the local insects and based on the the soil type and everything else, they're a huge proponent of that. So I love the fact that you're taking all that into consideration. It's fantastic. How big of a plot of land is it?
Just under an acre, I think. It's not a big place. We're going to start with what I call the blue barrel system, which is about it's kind of the minimum viable product. It requires just a few blue barrels, and you use one for the fish, and you use a couple that have been cut in halves for your plant troughs, and then this will be system with pumice. Actually, in this case, I'm going to contradict myself because pumice can be useful in these aquaponics systems where you're not using soil. You do need that medium. This is a flood and drain system. Yeah. So as opposed to a floating system. So a few blue barrels, that'll go in first. We'll have the water running and the fish in quite rapidly, and then we'll scale up from there. I have some design principles that I hold very tightly to, and one is right size bite, and the other is scalability. So when I'm building whatever that pipe is, I like to make sure it's got a manifold in case I want to add another one on, that kind of thing.
Well, I would highly recommend the UVI system because you can make it really small, four barrels for the fish and one tank for floating. It's a deep water culture. The other option too is if you look into dual root zones, that is an ebb and flow. I've set those up before, and the only problem that I struggle with the ebb and flows is the valve that releases the water is you talk about energy, dude. Like these things will be working fine, and all of a sudden they just stop working, and now the water's not removing, or the water's not coming, or it's not building up. It's just draining. I forget the name of the mechanism.
Bell siphon.
Bell
Yeah,
siphon.
he's talking about the bell siphon.
Yeah,
There's
those things are finickiest mother blanking, you know what things that we've ever created. And and you know, look, maybe it's my energy, like maybe it's me, but when I've worked with them, you know, again, they'll be working great for a month and then they just stop, and there's no reason why. Like you look for algae, there's no algae buildup. There's no reason why it stopped, but you know, and then you pull it apart, put it back together, and it starts working again. So anyway, those are my complaints about that type of system. You know, I did both, you know, flood and drain as well as dual root zones. I tried both of them. I definitely like the dual root zone better because the plant was truly in soil. Um, and a lot of times, what happens is that hydrogen over time, um, you got to take it out and like totally wash it down. You got to hit reset.
Understood. Yeah.
Where the UVI system is, you don't ever hit reset as long as you have appropriate way to get all of the muck or what we call suspended solids out of the water column before you put the water into the deep water culture. That was the one failure that the UVI system had, was that they had what was called a degassing tank, which was a cone bottom tank filled with bird netting to catch the particulate and create a environment where the bacteria could break that down to smaller and smaller parts, but you'd still get what we call aquatic snow. So aquatic snow is like, you know, like suspended solids that don't really fall out of suspension. They do eventually, but it takes a long time. And if you try to like clean them up, they just go poof, they're back into a dust cloud again. And that's the one failure that the UVI system had, was over time those, you know, the aquatic snow would build up and create anaerobic zones.
Okay.
There was a
Well,
gentleman, Eric Highfield, who was a dear friend of mine, who came up with a concept of using shrimp to get into those anaerobic zones and keep that stirred up so that it would flow back in, and hopefully break down further. And he had some pretty good successes with that until he got bit. They got these really long claws. I think they're like a freshwater prawn is what they were, but they're pretty mean little suckers.
okay. Well, if I can respond to that, I would say that just so your listeners are all caught up, you mentioned UVI, which is University Virgin Islands,
Correct.
and James Rakoczy, which I think is Racozci.
Rakosi. It's pronounced Rakosi.
Rakoczy. Thank you. And what you're talking about is essentially it's wastewater management. And the beauty of aquaponics, at least in theory, is that we're going to use our waste product from the fish, our fish waste, to feed our plants, to essentially filter out those solids that are suspended and dissolved. Yeah. So the technical challenge in these aquaponics systems of any scale is it's often filters, and treating that fish waste as, you know, there's so much of it that it becomes a waste, and instead of a resource, you're not able to use the resource. It's a waste. Yeah. So that's kind of as far as just to kind of bring us up to speed to where we are. So I don't have a ton of experience in aquaponics. I have some, certainly, but um, I love the idea of the freshwater shrimp or prawns in the system. And I understand that it's very, very useful to have these prawns of some kind in your plant troughs, because they will actually groom the roots of your plants. They'll eat the algae off the roots of your plants. You've talked about getting that kind of algal buildup in our what's rocketon, which is a trade name for essentially like a pumice. And the reason that that's desirable, as I understand it, is partly because of all those air pockets. Yeah. So that tends to get clogged. You eventually get, part of the way that that waste is getting reused is it's growing, there's mosses growing and such. So that can, require that you maintain the system. So I'm on board, at least that far, with all you've said, but we've we've a little bit left out the well, we've entirely left out the subtle energy element there. So I will say a couple things there, and one is that the more species you can bring into your ecosystem, the more homeostasis you'll have, the more self-balancing and self-regulating it'll be. And when we when we're pumping water, there's under pressure through pipes, there's a kind of, we're denaturing it in a certain sense. Live water has spiral to it. Water wants to travel in spirals, and so that we can add energy to that water by stirring it, and we can add energy to that water with sound, and we can add energy to that water with color, and we can add energy to that water with crystals or elixirs or in any number of ways. And I love anything I don't fully understand, which is part of the reason I love aquaponics. There's so many different parts to the system required, but some of the parts that I love actually are those things like the bell siphon and the idea of lifting water by forcing air down below the surface and then letting it bubble up through a pipe. And so carrying the air up, the water up with air. Uh, and just the design challenge of having the most elegant system that maybe only has one pump, or perhaps has a water tank where you're storing your water uphill in the first place, so that you can, that pump, that's a real complex, interesting thing, getting the right pump so that you're actually using the right amount of energy to pump the right amount of water, uh, which isn't always the case. And then uh, you're cycling your pump on and off, or how you got to manage that. You've got fish that are, if they're tilapia, they're warm water fish. Your major expenses are going to be that fish tank, first of all, and then secondly, heating that fish tank if you're going to do that. And that's certainly the beauty of the whole aquaponics system, is you hit that sweet spot of 70 degrees or so, and your plants have that throughout the day. When your plants are in the dirt, in the earth, they're going to cool off at night, and the growth cycle is going to slow down. So in that controlled environment at 70 degrees, you're going to get like that exponential growth increase. So you want to bring in some heat. So how are you going to do that in an ecological way? Are you going to generate methane on site? Are you going to have a windmill to generate electricity? Or are you going to use hot compost? So these are the really meaty parts of aquaponics. For me, actually, it's like everything around the fish is also, whether it's the soldier fly larva or whatever it might be. It's all very exciting. We're going to have to bring in bees, or we get to bring in bees and earthworms, and how are we going to integrate all those into the system?
Yeah, no, it's a one of the best learning tools I've ever found for people that are excited. Like if you set one of these up at a school, the kids just go ballistic. And they're learning about electricity, plumbing, forces, energy, fish, animal husbandry, plants. It's one of the most amazing things that you can introduce to either an adult or a child, because there's just so many facets to it, like you said.
Mm-hmm. My first aquaponics system was the one that I helped build at Ukiah High School. And the great strength of the aquaponics system is it is a phenomenal educational tool, but it's also a great drawback to the aquaponics system, because once you have an aquaponics system, then everybody wants to see it, and that takes up a lot of time.
So another piece of the puzzle that you should look into is what's called radial flow filters. So I don't know if you know how I came about, why my company is called Kingdom Aquaponics, but basically I wanted to bring aquaponics to everybody without them having to grow the fish and the vegetables. Because I'll be honest, being really good with understanding water chemistry and fish husbandry, that's a journey in its own. And equally so, plants, being a really good gardener and understanding soil types and plant health and plant nutrition, that's a whole journey in itself. And so when anybody really gets excited about aquaponics, I usually encourage them, hey, just get a small startup and see how you do. And if you get frustrated or you lose your fish and your plants or one or the other, you'll understand why you don't want to just dive into this. And so what I did was I started my own, aquaculture system. So it was 1,000-gallon tank. I had 150 tilapia, and I had this radial flow filter that would basically collect the manure. All I wanted was the fish poop. That's the foundation of all my work was creating what's called fish mulm, which is a biological. I mean, it has the soil food web in it. I mean, it's the most amazing product. You put it on plants, they react. Like I did a project out here 2 years ago, maybe three now, where they had declining redwoods. And the redwoods down here in Southern California, they're actually like a sequoia version, southern sequoia, are struggling because of the change in the climate. And so this very, very wealthy man had these 300 plus foot tall groves, three groves of these sequoias, these southern redwoods. And they were really bad. Like they had, they long branches and there was only like a few leaves on the branches and just a couple little buds on the very ends. And he goes, can you fix these? And I'm like, well, I'll do my magic for you. But bottom line is don't expect to see plant reaction like you did in the avocados and the lemons. Those trees are going to take a lot longer. And so he's all right, do whatever you got to do, carte blanche. I went there, I pounded them with my products, and lo and behold, within a month, little leaves were popping out all along the branches. I went back there after the fires down here in Somas. They lost the avocado orchard except for a pocket and the lemon orchard except for a pocket. You talk about heartbreaking, my friend. I knew each and every one of those trees by name because I had to bring them back from near death. But I looked at the redwoods. Oh my God, they are gorgeous. And that's the soil biology. That's the show. It's all about biology, right? And it's not like you have to do this over and over again. You do it once, twice, three times to get the system up and running, the what we call the nutrient cycling system, and you walk away. As long as you don't ever use synthetics again, you can't destroy it. Just use water only, and it'll figure it out. So those are the reasons why I got into aquaponics in the first place, was to capture the
Mm-hmm.
waste and use that and bring it to people so they didn't have to do all the hard work of rearing, keeping fish, and taking care of the plants. Ken, do we have any questions? Sorry, we
Yeah.
were just on a tear.
We do, and I wanted to get into those right now. Now, you guys, we were talking about vortexes at the very beginning, and Perpetual wanted to know vortex water swirls. You get vortexes in things like that.
Okay, well, to clarify, there's the kind of vortex that we all are familiar with, which is like a whirlpool or a whirlwind, which is a material like air or water swirling. Air and water both behave according to fluid dynamics. But when I'm talking about vortexes, I'm often talking about an energy vortex, which is I think of as being an electromagnetic phenomena. In one model, it's torus, or a donut kind of a model. It's a very turbulent place of electromagnetic energy, perhaps. And if you have any area at all in your garden, then you can walk around the space and you may feel variations in the energy there. And if you have a space that feels especially good, sure, let's call that a vortex. If you're wanting to energize your water, then you can use something like a flow form or some other device to swirl your water to impart that natural vortex or re-impart that natural vortex to your water. You can store it in an egg-shaped urn, as Schauberger did.
Okay. And then does everyone pick up on a vortex?
Some more consciously than others, I guess. I would say that we're all affected by it, whether we're aware of it or not. Sometimes for me, it's just as subtle as a tingling in my face that if I'm not being aware and conscious, I could just like scratch it like it's an itch. But I do feel sensitivity in my face. And I think almost everyone can readily learn to be sensitive to these energies.
Okay. And then we're going to, are you talking about labradorite? I can't even pronounce that, Leighton. It's a rock.
Labradorite. Labradorite's a beautiful brownish rock that has these blue crystals in it.
Okay.
And that's a question from when you were talking about the stone cutting and all of that. So
yeah, labradorite is like there's a blue stone too that has a lot of ritualistic properties. It's been kind of one of the stones that have been worshipped over the years. The blue one comes from Africa, and it's tied into some very powerful women who used it for healing. And it's right on the tip of my tongue. If it
bite
comes
your tongue, get it out.
Ouch. Oh God,
So,
I have pieces of it, but I can't remember it anyway.
Well, you think about it, Dan. This one is a statement. Supernessa is an indigenous from Canada. He does a lot of stuff with trees and tree sap. But for when you were talking about going around your property, he's suggesting get a water drum and fill it with cannabis to actually promote energy. So I just wanted to point that out for you.
I'm not sure that's the kind of energy I want to promote.
Well,
but I'm not against people using any means necessary to expand their consciousness. I'll say that.
Okay. And then, well, actually, we'll leave that for the last one. Dirt right. I have Court missed some of the program. Can you guys take a bit starting rainwater and how aquaponic systems can be incorporated to flow all irrigation water through the system?
Oh, I think I can hit that actually. If you want to let me take that one, Leighton.
Yeah, sure.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but let's say you're on a spot that does have a lot of serpentinite in the soil. It's not going to be very good soil, and you're not going to want to disturb it because I think you can release some arsenic. So it's be real great to have a soilless system. So sometimes aquaponics is essentially you have to use aquaponics because of your situation there. The other great time to use aquaponics system is where you don't have a lot of water because it's a recirculating system. It's not a flow through system. You're hopefully not going to use a lot of irrigation water in your system, but you're going to lose some through evaporation, just a percentage or two over a course of a week or two. Wouldn't you say, Leighton?
Actually, you're going to want to water brighten. So
Say
that
more.
means you want to add like 5% fresh water. I think it was a day. So regardless of evaporation is evaporation. But if you add 5% fresh water a day, you will reintroduce the minerals that are necessary. Fish have a stomach on their outside as well as their stomach on their inside. The stomach on their outside is a biofilm that basically pulls minerals out of the water. and through the bacterial processes and digests it and actually induces it into the fish from the outside. So look into water brightening. It's an important attribute of aquaponics, healthy aquaponic systems.
Okay.
Cool. And then this one's for Leighton. How often do you see diatoms with somewhat rapid mobility? I saw one moving, dragging aggregates like a tow truck and consuming it as it went, which was cool.
Dude, I was just down at his property, 711 Birdview Ave in Malibu. It's all topiary, dude. This place is out of control. So we did 15 soil samples throughout the property. She's been in decline for about 5 years due to some. Well, they've been planting plants that have got these friggin' blue-green long-term NPK releases in them, and they've been building up and obviously declining. All the plants. So I did 15 microscope slides. In 3 areas, I saw those exact same square diatoms, modal diatoms, and they were dragging friggin' food clusters, just like you said. That is the first time I've seen those. I've seen plenty of diatoms that are not modal, but that was the first one I saw. And I tried to get a picture of it. I finally got my camera all set up, and I must have tapped the screen, and I couldn't find it again. But yeah, I saw 3 of them. I saw two in one slide, one in another slide, and another in another slide. All these were different locations on the property. But the one thing they did have in common were they all were either a tall tree or a tall hedge. So my inclination is the sea breeze, when a really windy day is picking up the water off the surface and bringing them in, and then they're hitting the trees and falling to the ground. But yeah, they're really cool.
Well,
So
and Dirt
funny.
Race coming on next week. He says he has a video of it. So if you want,
Nice.
bring it up. So let's go to our last question, guys. And it's from Lily. Leighton, remember to mention what happened at the barn in Maine.
Oh yeah, those guys. Oh man, they're amazing people. These Dennis is a gentleman my age. He's brought up, has a beautiful wife, 2 sons and 2 daughters, and very much spiritual, into crystals. As a matter of fact, randomly out of the blue, he sent me like a handful of these quartz crystals that he had found on the property, and said, "Hey, these sent me a message, and I needed to send them to you." And it was ironic. It was probably, I don't know, a few months after Pauline passed, and he didn't know. Hardly anybody knew at that point in time. And so it was just really ironic. But yeah, they're very much into using their crystals, putting them into their raised beds. They actually like did some crazy stuff, like inoculating their logs in a pond before they brought them in and built hugelkultur. But talk about like people that understand what you're talking about, Dan, but don't know how to explain it. Like they're sensitive, they can feel it. Perhaps like me, they just never had been taught, you know, how to understand it or how to interpret that. I mean, a lot of times, like before when I was younger, like I just ignored these feelings. Like I ignored, the fact that I could feel that person's negative energy, or I didn't understand why I attracted all these fucking narcissists in my life, and why, when I was on a hike, I would just stop and start staring at something. Like I didn't know why I did that. So I think they're very much in touch in that way, that they really don't have a way to understand like what it is, or like seeing the ore of a plant. The first time I saw that, I was like, rubbing my eyes. I'm like, what's going on? But the more I stared, I could just see it clear as day. So I some people probably like understand this, or just think that it's in their head, or they're weird or whatever. But I love the show that we get to talk about this kind of stuff, because maybe we will get the message to some people out there that can feel those like vortexes, and And now they can understand, oh, what does that mean? Like, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And then they might read into it deeper and realize that, oh my God, this is a ley line. Like you said, I'm in this new bed and I can't sleep. Right? Why can't I sleep here? I sleep great every night. So, important conversations that hopefully enlighten people's third
Good.
eye.
Good. I'd like to say we know more than we understand. So
Oh yeah. Or the more you know, the less you understand. Love it. Well,
Anyway, guys, that's the 2 hours.
well, I really appreciate your time, Dan. This has been an absolute pleasure. I'm sorry I took you outside the box so far in so many different directions, but I love a good conversation, and again, I love to kind of brainstorm and chop it up and see where the conversation goes. So thank you.
yeah. Well, sometimes you gotta drop a few. Got to drop some bait and see who bites.
There you go. There you go. Ken, as always, thank you so much for all your time
Thank
back
you,
behind the
Ken.
scenes, making this happen every week, and thank you to the audience for tuning in every week.
And Dan, don't run away. As for the show, I'd like to have you on with Andy Lopez, and that's Wednesday evenings, Leighton. And I think you're
Okay.
on the show this coming Wednesday. I think that's what Andy said. Talking about
What?
compost on Wednesday.
What time is it on Wednesday?
It'd be 6 p.m. your time.
Okay, hopefully I'm home in time.
You'll have to talk to Andy about that
I
because
will.
he just sent me a list. Okay.
Yeah, I'll talk to him. I owe him a phone call. We got to catch up on a bunch of different stuff, so I'll call him tomorrow.
And Dan, I'd like to have you on our show as well on the Wednesday evening and talking about the Angie crystals and what Andy does. And he doesn't crush them like his mother does. He actually energizes them like what you were saying. So I think that'd be a fantastic conversation. And guys, on Thursday, we have the chiropractic is sexy again. The two functional chiropractors. You guys are going to want to start watching that because a lot of our audience has been injured, has problems. These are two ladies that can help you get through some of those with body movement, etc. But other than that, guys, I got to run tomorrow, so there's no show tomorrow. But other than that, everybody have a wonderful day and happy Mother's Day from yesterday.